All right, so get ready because we're about to go deep into like a really, really dark part of Ukrainian history. We're talking about Serhiy Tkach.
Oh, okay.
And you've given us this YouTube video
Right.
about this serial killer.
Yes.
And it's crazy because his reign of terror went on for like over 2 decades.
Wow.
So it's definitely a case that's like super fascinating, but also just horrifying.
Yeah.
So what we're going to try to do today is like go beyond the surface level stuff.
Okay.
See what we can uncover.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly compelling about this case is that it's not just about like the crimes themselves, but also all of the like systemic failures that led to all these wrongful convictions and the impact that had.
Exactly. The human cost of all those errors is huge. And that's something we'll definitely be talking about more.
Hardly.
But first, let's just like paint a picture of Tkach himself.
Okay.
So he actually confessed to over 100 murders.
Wow.
But only 37 were officially proven. And his modus operandi was like just so meticulous.
Really?
He preyed on young girls.
Okay.
Specifically between 9 and 21 years old.
That age range is really interesting.
Yeah, and it seems like he believed that children were just easier targets.
Yeah, that's awful.
It's a horrible thought, and his methods were just so calculated.
Like, what do you mean?
So the video describes how he used condoms to avoid leaving DNA.
Smart.
He took his victims' clothing to get rid of trace evidence.
Wow.
He even planned his escape routes to throw off tracking dogs.
So he was really trying to cover his tracks.
It's like he was almost obsessed with not getting caught.
It really does speak to a mind that was not only twisted, but also like very aware of all of the techniques that investigators use.
Exactly. He was using that knowledge to his advantage.
Yeah.
And he stayed one step ahead for so long.
It's unbelievable.
It's crazy. And then there's this ritual that he followed.
What was that?
It's honestly kind of hard to talk about.
Oh, okay.
But he would drink vodka.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes with Dimedrol.
With what?
Dimedrol.
Okay.
And then he would strangle his victims.
Oh, wow.
To avoid leaving defensive wounds.
I see.
And it's fascinating because, like, why strangulation?
Yeah, why do you think?
I don't know. Was it just to, like, avoid a mess?
Maybe.
Or was there something more to it?
I mean, it definitely makes you wonder about his psychology.
Yeah.
I mean, strangulation is such a personal and hands-on method.
Yeah.
It suggests like this need for control.
Right.
To really feel the life drain away.
It's just such a chilling layer to add on top of everything else.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
And as if all that wasn't disturbing enough.
There's more.
He also kept trophies.
Really?
Like lipstick, dolls, shoes.
Right.
He even wore underwear as rags.
Ew, that's so gross.
It's so disturbing. What do you make of that?
Well, I think trophies are often a way for serial killers to like relive their crimes.
Okay.
To hold on to that power and control.
I see.
Long after the act itself.
Okay.
But the underwear as rags, that's like a whole other level.
Right.
It's like he didn't just want to possess his victims.
Yeah.
But to like degrade them.
Oh, wow.
Even after death.
That's really messed up.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of detail that like sticks with you. You can't forget it.
Nope.
But his reign of terror wasn't just in one area.
Oh, really?
He operated across multiple regions of Ukraine.
So where did he go?
Well, his movements are really interesting.
Oh.
So he started in Dnipropetrovsk.
Okay.
Then he moved to Zaporizhia.
Mm-hmm.
And he even committed crimes in Kharkiv.
Wow. So all over.
Yeah, it seems like his criminal activity just moved with him.
So where did it all begin?
His first murder was back in 1980 in Simferopol.
Oh, okay.
And this is really strange, but he actually tried to report it to the police.
What?
But he didn't like their response.
So he wanted to get caught.
It makes you wonder if he was looking for recognition.
Yeah, even back then.
Like, was there some twisted desire for acknowledgement?
It's possible.
Maybe even like a messed up sense of justice.
That's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, but it definitely adds like another layer of complexity to his profile.
Totally. So let's look at some of his key cases.
Okay.
The ones that really stand out in the video.
Right.
Like the murders of Olga Dmytrenko and Olya Shuvalova in Pavlorad.
I've heard of those.
These were young girls brutally murdered.
That's so sad.
And these cases really caused widespread fear.
Yeah, because they were so young.
Exactly. And they were innocent. They were from the community.
Right.
It made everyone feel vulnerable.
And terrified because it could happen to anyone.
Exactly. And what makes it even worse is that an innocent man, Ihor Reshkov,
Yeah.
was wrongfully convicted
Oh, no.
for those murders.
That's just awful.
It's a reminder of how the justice system can fail.
Especially when there's so much pressure.
To find the culprit.
Yeah, they just want to pin it on someone.
Exactly. And that theme, unfortunately, repeats itself throughout this case.
Oh, no.
We'll get into the wrongful convictions more later.
Okay.
But going back to Tkach...
There's this detail that shows how bold he was.
What was that?
He actually committed a murder near a police stakeout.
What?
I know, it's crazy.
That's so brazen.
It's like he was playing with the authorities.
Yeah, like he was daring them to catch him.
Exactly. This wasn't just about him doing what he wanted.
Right.
It was about the thrill.
The power.
Yes, and then there's the case of Volodymyr Svitlikny.
Oh, yeah, I remember that name.
He was wrongfully convicted of his own daughter's murder.
That's horrible.
And he was driven to suicide in prison.
Oh, my God. That's just devastating.
It's so sad because the system failed to catch the real killer.
Yeah.
And an innocent man lost his life.
It's like a double tragedy.
It really is. And it shows how one man's crimes can have such far-reaching consequences.
It's a sobering thought, for sure.
So Tkach eventually moved to apology with his family.
Okay.
And his murders became less frequent.
Oh, so he slowed down.
Yeah. But they didn't get any less brutal.
Interesting.
So it makes you wonder, like, what caused that shift?
Yeah. Did settling down change his behavior?
Maybe.
Or was it just different opportunities?
I don't know. It's something to think about.
Definitely.
But now let's talk about those wrongful convictions.
Okay.
What's really striking is that so many involved coerced confessions.
Yeah.
And they were often extracted through torture.
Oh, God, that's awful.
It shows a huge problem in law enforcement at the time.
Right. It's like they didn't care about the truth.
They just wanted results.
Yeah, and they used whatever means necessary.
Exactly. And the video talks about Vitaly's case.
What happened to him?
He was wrongfully imprisoned for 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
That's so long.
And it was based on flimsy evidence.
What else?
They threatened to hurt his family if he didn't confess.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's so messed up, and it shows how vulnerable people are.
In a system that doesn't care.
Exactly. It's a system that prioritizes results.
Over due process.
Exactly.
It's terrifying.
It makes you wonder how many other people suffered the same fate.
Yeah, how do we even know it's true?
All right, how do we untangle this whole mess?
It's gonna be tough, but that's what we're here for.
Exactly. We need to uncover the facts.
But also the context.
And the motivation.
And the consequences.
Of everything.
And I think we also need to recognize that the pursuit of justice,
yeah,
while noble, can sometimes lead to more injustice.
It's true.
So we have to be really careful.
Absolutely. We were just talking about the wrongful convictions and like how messed up it was that innocent people were punished.
Yeah, it's truly heartbreaking.
But before we get back to like the systemic failures and all that,
okay,
I'm curious about Serhiy Tkach himself.
What about him?
Like what made him do these awful things?
Right, like what was his motivation?
And what can we learn from his psychology?
Yeah, even though it's super disturbing.
Exactly. So we know he was fixated on young girls.
Mm-hmm. Between 9 and 21.
Yeah, and that's a really significant detail.
For sure, it's like a starting point for understanding him.
Right. And you mentioned pedophilia.
Yeah, the attraction to prepubescent children.
But couldn't it also be that he just wanted easier targets?
It's possible. I mean, he even said that himself.
Right, so maybe it's a combination of things.
Probably. Yeah, pedophilia might explain part of it.
Okay.
But the need for control, the ease of overpowering a child,
yeah,
those definitely played a role too.
It's just scary to think about how those things can all be connected.
Yeah, it's not always clear-cut.
So let's dig deeper into his psychology.
Okay.
We know he planned everything out.
Right.
He had his rituals.
Yeah.
And he showed zero remorse.
Right.
What else can we learn from his behavior?
Well, one thing that stands out is his detachment.
Detachment?
Yeah, from the emotional side of things.
What do you mean?
Like, he didn't seem to have any empathy for his victims.
Really?
No, or their families.
Why?
He would just talk about the murders so calmly.
That's chilling.
Yeah, almost like he was talking about the weather or something.
And remember what he said when they arrested him?
What was that?
He said, "I've been waiting for you for 25 years.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It gave me goosebumps.
It's such a creepy thing to say.
Like, what does that even mean?
Right. Was he trying to say he knew he'd get caught eventually?
Maybe, or like he wanted the attention.
Could be. He might have wanted that recognition.
It's like he was playing a game.
And he knew the rules.
It's so messed up. And then there's the whole thing with the trophies.
Yeah, the lipstick and the dolls.
And the underwear he wore as rags.
Oh, yeah. That's just sick.
What do you think those objects meant to him?
Well, like we said before, trophies are a way for serial killers to connect to their crimes.
Okay.
To relive those moments of power.
Uh-huh.
But the underwear as rags, that's different.
Yeah. It's way more than just possession.
Exactly. It's about degrading his victims.
Right.
Humiliating them even after they're gone.
It's just pure evil.
It really is hard to understand.
And think about all the communities he terrorized.
Yeah, they must have been so scared.
Living with that constant fear.
Not knowing when or where he would strike next.
The video mentioned that people were cutting down bushes.
Really?
So they could see better at night.
Wow. That's intense.
It shows you how paranoid everyone was.
Like they were living in a war zone.
Yeah, and then you have the families of the victims.
Right, the ones who lost their children.
Unimaginable what they went through.
The grief, the anger.
The trauma.
Yeah, and in many cases, they thought the wrong person was caught.
Yeah.
So they didn't even get real justice.
It just adds insult to injury.
It's a terrible situation all around.
Okay, so let's talk about those wrongful convictions.
All right.
We know that coerced confessions were a big problem.
Yeah, and often they were forced through torture.
Like in Vitali's case.
Yeah, where they threatened his family.
It's just disgusting.
They didn't care about the truth at all.
It shows you how the system can be manipulated.
And how innocent people can get caught in the crossfire.
So why were these tactics used so often?
Well, back then they didn't have the same resources.
Like what?
DNA testing wasn't really a thing.
Oh.
So they relied on getting confessions.
Even if they had to force them.
Yeah, they wanted to close the cases quickly.
And they didn't always care how they did it?
It was a recipe for disaster.
So you have all this pressure to solve these cases.
Right.
Plus, they didn't have the tools or technology.
Yeah, and then you add in eyewitness testimony.
Which can be, I don't know,
especially when people are traumatized.
Exactly. Their memories can be messed up.
Or they can be pressured to say certain things.
It's a perfect storm of failures.
And innocent people paid the price.
They lost years of their lives.
Their reputations were ruined.
And even after they were released.
It's hard to come back from that.
It makes you realize how important it is to have a fair system.
Yeah, one that protects everyone.
And ensures that justice is truly served.
It's a lesson we can't afford to forget.
This case is definitely a dark chapter in Ukrainian history.
Filled with brutality and fear.
But as we move to the last part of this deep dive,
okay,
I'm hoping we can find some hope.
Yeah.
And learn from this tragedy.
That's the goal.
So we've spent like the last 2 parts of this deep dive.
Yeah.
Really going deep into this case, exploring all the details of Tkach's crimes.
Right, all the disturbing stuff.
His psychology and like all the things that went wrong with the legal system.
The wrongful convictions, all that.
It's definitely been a lot to process.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure you're feeling it too.
Definitely, it's heavy stuff.
But as we wrap up,
I
think it's important to like shift gears a bit.
Yeah.
Look for some lessons we can learn.
Right, like what can we take away from all this?
And maybe even find some hope.
Yeah, because it's easy to get lost in the darkness.
Exactly. But I think we can come out of this with a sense of purpose.
Okay.
Like, how do we prevent this from happening again?
That's the big question.
So where do we even begin?
Well, one of the biggest things, I think, is that we need strong safeguards.
Safeguards?
Yeah, within our legal systems.
Okay.
We saw how, like, coerced confessions and bad eyewitness testimony.
And the lack of technology.
Like DNA testing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All those things led to huge injustices.
And it's not just about the people who were wrongly convicted.
Right. It affects everyone.
Because it makes people lose trust in the system.
Exactly. If you don't believe in the justice system, then like, what do we even have?
Right. It undermines everything.
So how do we make sure these safeguards are in place?
Yeah. That's a huge question.
It is. But I think awareness is the first step.
Awareness.
Yeah. Like, by talking about these tough topics, we start to understand what went wrong.
I see.
And how to fix it.
So what can we do as individuals?
Well, we need to be more informed.
Informed.
Yeah, like don't just believe everything you hear.
Right.
Question things, demand evidence.
And hold people accountable.
Exactly. We need more transparency in the system.
We can't just accept things blindly.
Right. We have to be critical thinkers.
And you mentioned the Ni Saladina podcast.
Oh, yeah.
That focuses on the wrongful convictions.
It's really powerful. Yeah. It gives a voice to the people who are silenced.
And it reminds us that these aren't just statistics.
Right.
These are real people with real lives.
So it's not just about the big picture.
Yeah, we have to remember the human cost.
The individual stories.
Exactly.
Well, this brings us to the end of our deep dive into the case of Serhiy Tkach.
Yeah, it's been a tough one.
Definitely a lot of darkness and sadness.
But hopefully we've learned something.
I think so. I think we've gained some valuable insights.
And a renewed sense of purpose.
Like, we can't let this happen again.
We have to keep fighting for justice.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Yeah, it's been an important one.
Keep exploring these issues.
And keep asking questions.
Use your voice to make a difference.
Because we can make the world a better place.
Thanks for listening.